Michael, thank you so much for coming on to Inflection Time today. And it's so nice to see you. It's been a long time.
It's great to see you. I hear about you from time to time doing what you're doing, and that's terrific. I always think it's great when people have different versions of themselves, and when you have different acts on your life, right? Like your first act, everybody knew about, and that's led you to this second act, and I just think that's really cool. So good to see you.
Thank you, Michael. And I've got this really strong memory, and I'm trying to figure out where we were, but I think it might have been Sudbury at a very, very long sports awards dinners, which used to be the most incredibly long-winded thing in the world if you were invited to a sports dinner. And it went on for hours and hours and hours. And afterwards, we went to the Keg restaurant together. And I don't know, I guess we must have connected in some way, but I have a really strong memory of that. And it was a lot of years ago.
Well, I think you only went with me to the Keg because Keg were sponsors of the show I hosted, Off the Record, and you thought, okay, free dinner for sure.
I mean, I was an athlete then, of course, free food.
I can't tell you how often when I used to, I mean, I don't go to the Keg very often, but when I do, it's oh, this must be free for you. And it's no. But I think, would that have been Thunder Bay?
I think it was Thunder Bay.
Okay.
It was Thunder Bay.
Then I remember it well.
The sports dinner, that was a good 4 hours, good 4.5 hours.
No, it wasn't a good 4.5. It was a really dull 4.5. And the only thing worse than going to a 4.5 hour award show, as I don't know why I was there, but when you're not winning an award, which is typically my experience at award shows, but. So yes, nice to see you.
It's nice to see you too. And you've made a lot of, you sort of opened up our conversation talking about next chapters. I think this is very apropos for our conversation today, because I do believe our life has all these chapters, depending on whether we're willing to take risks and grow, right? Because it's no guarantee that we can reinvent ourselves or go in new directions. It actually takes a lot of guts and a lot of hard work. And I wanted to talk to you just first about finishing at Off the Record, which was, a pretty special part of your career. I think you started to have those kind of conversations that you wanted to have, because I got a sense that as a journalist, you were always looking to go deeper with the athletes, and because sports reporting is notoriously bad reporting, isn't it? The athletes say, yeah, it was a good race, I'm sort of disappointed, the team says this, but it's all so staid. And I think that Off the Record, you were able to go deeper with people and talk about stuff that had really nothing to do with sports, but was about the people themselves. So can you just talk a little bit about that chapter of your life?
Well, it was an amazing experience. Sometimes when I'm giving a mental health talk, I'll say, hey, if you just want to blurt out a name of someone famous, I bet you I either met them through this, or I bet you 6 degrees of separation, I know someone who met them. So I got this amazing opportunity to meet this cross section of people, Olympic athletes, and obviously all professional athletes and coaches, but also actors and musicians and politicians, and virtually every aspect of life was represented on our show. And what an amazing experience. What a gift that was for me.
Yeah.
So Off the Record was really, I guess in a lot of ways, it sort of defined my career. And I'm good with that. And you mentioned, I always saw my job as being representing the viewer. So if you represent the viewer, then in theory, if you get an answer, for instance, that you don't think is sufficient, if somebody is, and I talk about Gary Bettman a lot in this context, commissioner of the National Hockey League, you ask him a question, hey, Gary, so it's, I'm looking out my window right now and it's a little bit cloudy outside. What do you think of cloudy days? And he'll answer, well, when you go to a movie, you have to, it's no, I didn't ask you that.
Yeah.
And if you let him steer it in his direction, you never get the answers that you're asking because you think the viewer wants to know. So it's got to be no. And you can't be overly patient because there's a time frame on it. So I would, I saw it as my job to go, no. I asked you this question. And for that reason, I think a lot of people perceive me as being rude, right? But it's like, okay, well, a half hour
Let's
show is
call it
22
tenacious.
minutes.
You were tenacious. I mean, it's interesting that, I mean, as an athlete, obviously, our window of when we're good, we're young when, I mean, that's when your body is like great and you can do stuff with it. And a lot of athletes peak, you know, in their early 20s. I mean, actually rowing for me was a late development sport. I was so lucky that I was able to get peak at 30, you know, till I was 32. However, I often look back at my experiences, Michael, in sport, and I think about what I was learning, but not understanding. I was absolutely the type of athlete who had tunnel vision. And I mean, that's what made me great at what I did, but it also cut out a lot of opportunities and made a lot of things happening around me kind of less visible. And it's interesting now to look back and think, well, how would I have learned differently? Do you find you look back at your experience at Off the Record and some of the people that you met and the experiences you had? You obviously were interviewing these people, but you had to be, so while you were listening, you were waiting, right, for that next question. And so you're kind of listening, but then you're also hosting, like your mind's being split. It's hard to be fully present. But do you see now not only what an extraordinary opportunity that was, but the things that you learned from the people that came on your show?
You know, I think that one of the things I've done well in my life, and this is not going to end up being a boast when you hear what it is, but I'm just going to pause and let everyone think, oh, there he goes. He thinks he's so great. One of the things I've done really well in my life is appreciate my blessings. And I always thought this and often would say it, that, you know, like what a gift this job is. You know, I would phrase it this way. I say, you know, there's lots of people who could do my job, but I'm the only one with my job. So I always saw that as a real blessing. You know, the best experience I've had professionally was 2010 hosting in Whistler on CTV, which, you know, nobody ever saw me as a mainstream guy, but they gave me this great role to host the Olympics. And every second of that, I thought to myself, soak it in, you know, enjoy it, revel in it, because you're never getting it again. And here we are, 14 years later, and, you know, I never did it again. So I think I've always appreciated the gifts that I've been given, like hosting the kinds of things I'm talking about, and the number of people that, you know, I got to hear their wisdom or lack of wisdom, and the number of people that I got to learn from. Did I consciously say to myself always, okay, well, you have to file that away? No, but I think I'm a better person. I think I'm a more well-rounded person because of the people I was exposed to.
Are you a reflective person? Do you like to look back and, I don't know if analyze is the right word, but sort of unpack the experience of the past to see what you're taking forward?
You know, this is going to be a much deeper answer than you would have anticipated, but I'm pretty good at burying the past. A couple of things in my life that were really difficult for me. I have been able to try and successfully at times bury them and stop thinking about them. And if you reflect too much on the past, I think it's hard sometimes to filter. Okay, I'm going to reflect on the good stuff, but I'm not going to reflect on the bad stuff. So I tend not to be much of a reflector.
I mean, you're right. There's different ways that we all move forward in our lives. And when it pertains to our mental health, to our wellness, I found there's a very important kind of line, right? Like I've had to look at my past, particularly my childhood, growing up with a mom who had a severe mental illness, undiagnosed, not acknowledged in our home. And there were days that were real shit shows. And honestly, I never knew what I was coming home to. So there's trauma there. And I had to go back because I couldn't go forward until I went back. Saying that, and it was hard work. And I know you're a mental health advocate. You've lived and breathed this stuff now for many years. But there is that balance, isn't there? But between like going back and with the perspective and the strength of an adult to your childhood experiences that were so terrifying when you were a little child, and healing as much as you can, and forgiving as much as you can, because that is part of what has made me me. However, there's also being fully present to the experiences you have today, and not, of course, spending all your time or energy or, spiritual, emotional energy thinking about the past, but also imagining the future. So to me, there's always that kind of push and pull.
Well, first of all, I'm sorry that your mom went through that. And I mean, mental illness, like many illnesses, but in particular, is a family illness, right? It's a household illness. Like you can't avoid it. You can't, it just overwhelms, it overcomes every aspect of our lives. For me, my childhood was idyllic. My parents were totally devoted to my brother and I. We did everything together as a family. My parents would have done anything for me, but one of the things that they didn't do, because I never asked them, was they never got me help for what was severe anxiety and a phobia called emetophobia. Now, giving mental health talks, I'll throw that out and say, anyone know what I'm talking about? And it shocks me how often somebody knows what I'm talking about. As a matter of fact, for the series that I'm doing, I was interviewing a singer named Dallas Smith. Dallas Smith is a huge country star, and we were talking about our various experiences with depression and with anxiety. And then I said to him, and one of the things that I experienced that would have changed my life if someone else would have said, yeah, me too, but I never talked about it to anyone. And he said to me, think about this. I'm judging by your face. You have no idea what emetophobia is, right?
No, I don't.
Most people
don't. And, I'm barely living in this world a little bit.
He said to me, this was bizarre, my daughter has that. It was like, what? And what I've come to realize is that we can all think that we're the only ones. And mental illness does that to us, right? We isolate, we hide, we think we're the only ones because people don't talk about it. Emetophobia is the fear of throwing up. It's the fear of being around someone who throws up. It's all encompassing. And what you hear when you have emetophobia is, well, nobody likes to throw up. But that's not the issue. The issue is this fear that you have.
So I know with my work that we're doing at Unsinkable, that is really, the connection piece is really important, to know that somebody else is feeling this way. And you're right, when you're in the throes of depression, and I suffer from depression as well, but you're always feeling alone, or I always feel alone, ashamed. Like my experience is so isolating. And I've learned, call my doctor, call my therapist, call a friend. And it's just like I make myself do it. But what I actually want to do is not any of those things. So when we hear from Michael Landsberg, but then we also hear from regular humans who have been on this journey for longer than us. And I just think there's that possibility that you're going to touch someone who hasn't yet recognized that what they're suffering from, what they're experiencing is mental illness. And then there's mental health. And I think everybody's got mental health. If you're really lucky and you never had anything, and maybe the life hasn't messed up your chemistry or given you a series of events that have pushed you into mental illness, you're really fortunate. And maybe that makes you less able to relate and understand. But I think we all have a responsibility to relate and understand, because so many people are affected by mental health.
Yeah. I mean, I was in Edmonton. This was really profound. I mean, every time I'm sure you find the same thing, but when you go to speak about a subject like mental illness, some of the most significant conversations and some of the best good that you do come afterwards, when people will come up to you and not in front of an audience and say things. And I gave this talk, my usual talk, talking about the experience of depression and anxiety. And a woman came up to me and she was sobbing uncontrollably. And I said, look, I'm going to wait here until everybody's finished talking if they want to talk. So just come back when you feel like you can talk. She came back and I said, so what is it? It doesn't seem like sadness. And she said, it's not. She said, for the first time in my life, I feel understood. And there was this lesson that I learned at that moment, that it's one thing to tell people you're never alone. But the truth is, all of us fight battles in our life alone. You can go with a friend to have chemotherapy and sit beside them and hold their hand. But still, there's a big part of that battle that they're fighting on their own. But making someone feel understood has huge benefit, because it's a statement of, you're not the only one. This is not self-inflicted. A lot of us believe we're the only ones with this illness because we think we created it in our head. And why would anyone else experience the same thing? Because
technically might be true, but yes, it's real. The illness is real and the thoughts are real. And also, I think a lot of people look at their lives and they're like, what? And I think that's probably the worst response you can ever have with somebody who's suffering, to say, well, what's wrong with your life? Right. And they look at their own lives and they think, like, I'm an Olympic athlete. I have a wonderful, supportive husband. I have beautiful children. I have a career I love. How could I ever feel depressed and anxious?
Right.
Right.
But you see, that's a trap that other people fall into, looking and equating success and lifestyle and good things with mental health. But it's also a trap that we fall into as sufferers, because when we think to ourselves, we're not entitled to say, I know I have a great life, and I know, I have everything that other people would say, define a great life. But I still feel like I don't want to get out of bed in the morning, and I still feel like I can't experience joy, and I still feel this and that. And a lot of us will think to ourselves, I have no right to do that. How can I complain about something? I have everything.
Yeah. There's so many other people, right? There's so many other people who have so much less, who don't have the same opportunities. But you're right, it's a trap. I got so many questions to ask you, but I'd love to know what for you. So here you are hosting this incredible show, and you're on daily. You're interviewing some of the most famous people in the world, all these amazing Canadians, and you are not doing so great.
That is a pretty good way to describe it, in a good sort of euphemism, in sort of like, and you're not doing so great, because that's how I would talk. I would not say, I was doing really terribly.
Can you just for a second take me back to a really bad day when you were interviewing somebody, and how you were feeling and how you got through it?
The answer as to how I got through it is the easiest to answer. Yeah, I got through it because I had to, right? But a couple of challenges came from depression when it was most severe with me. And there was two dimensions to it. One is my brain is fogged. So here I kind of hang my hat on quickly responding to people, and to always having a response, and very often always having a smart ass line. And here I am feeling like, oh my God, I can't do that. I can't be that. But the worst thing is that with depression comes a loss of self-esteem. So I'm looking into the camera, I'm interviewing people about their lives. Keep in mind, like when you talk to an NFL player and you're talking to him about his life and you want to challenge him on something, you're challenging him on his life. So you better be pretty sure. But when you have depression, you're not sure of anything. So those days that were really difficult for me, I got through them because I had to. I didn't stay home because I had to go to work, but I also didn't stay home because I knew I wouldn't feel better. I would just start to beat myself up over the course of the day, going, oh God, like you're worse than you ever thought you were, because now you just can't pull it together. But I find every day with depression, especially, torturous. And I think that hosting a TV show was no more torturous than any other role that people play in their lives. Every job would have unique challenges if you have depression. So every job would have something different, but not more difficult. So I kind of always looked at it like, it doesn't matter whether I'm doing this or I'm driving a bus or I'm an accountant. Living with this feeling that I had is just a life and death struggle every second.
I'm really sorry to hear that. When did you know you had to get help?
I knew I had to get help when I turned out an offer to do something that I really wanted to do and used to really enjoy doing. And it was also part of my job. And I turned down this, I was supposed to screen a movie the night before the guest was on the show. And I turned down that opportunity. The producer called me and said, "You want to go together?" And I said, "No, I'm not going. I can't go," or whatever. And when I hung up the phone, I thought to myself, wow, why did I do that? And I started to forensically evaluate my own life the previous 9 months. And I looked at all the things that I had stopped doing, all the ways that I had retreated, all of the thoughts that I had about myself, which were totally different than the thoughts I had, say, a year or two before that. And I came to the conclusion, something is really wrong with me. And I came to the conclusion, I'm gone. And I have been replaced by someone who I hate, who I don't recognize, and who I don't want to be.
For me, it was probably always there, like low-grade depression. And I realize now that I kept pushing and driving and accomplishing. I mean, this is after a lot of therapy, Michael, as a way to feel worthy. And then when I would stop, I would feel really crappy. And I had little kids at home. And one of the things that scared the crap out of me was the rage I felt sometimes coping with these young children. My husband had left, so I was, alone with the kids. They were like 2.5, 5. So you got all this shit layered on top of each other. And I couldn't stand up for myself, but I could stand up for my kids. And I think I was too arrogant, proud. Maybe arrogance is not the right word, proud. I also didn't think there was a way forward. I didn't understand that actually when you talk to someone who has been trained and understands that you can feel better and that actually you can change your brain a little bit. And also that chemistry, in my case, probably because of early trauma, played a pretty significant role in my road to wellness.
Wow. It's not my show, but if it was, I'm going to say it anyway. Thank you for sharing that, because, I think that because the symptoms of an illness like depression are so untangible that, we hear, okay, symptoms of depression, loss of appetite, loss of, can't sleep at night, tired during the day, things like that. That's not really something we relate to. So what frame of reference would you have had to say, okay, well, I think, this rage that I have, I think, that's a symptom of depression. But I can tell you, somebody watching now who's in that kind of position where they're angry and they don't think they should be angry and the situation doesn't call for them to be angry, are going, well, I heard Silken Laumann talking about that and, kind of describes me. That's back to the power of feeling understood. And you do that for people when you give up this really deeply painful aspect of your life.
Yeah. When did you, thank you, by the way, thank you for listening. Actually, when did you decide you needed to tell this story publicly?
That was, I never spoke about it, even though, as I said, I'd had anxiety when I was, since I was a kid. And this was, this anxiety that I had when I was a kid I never spoke about it because, I just, I I'm not 100% sure why I never did. Part of it is I never lived in anyone else's brain. So
it was
it's
also
like,
a different environment even 15 years ago, 10 years ago. People weren't talking about it, and people did see it as a weakness.
So I never spoke about it when I got hit by depression. I never spoke about it on TV, but everybody in my life knew. So it wasn't like I was showing any signs of being ashamed or embarrassed. I just thought, who would care? To be honest, I thought, okay, well, first of all, why would I do it? I was so stupid not to realize that the stigma can be lessened if you speak about it. Other people will speak about it. And I just never thought about it. I never talked about it. And as a result, when this tattoo I have on my arm represents 11/24/08 YULMH 5210400, November 24th, 2008, Montreal, Marriott Hotel Room 521, 4 a.m. in the morning. I understood suicide. I had been depressed severely for about a year, and I had rejected treatment, which had helped me. And I was so deeply in this hole that I understood. Sitting on the edge of my bed, we were in Montreal to shoot off the record at the Grey Cup. I sat on my bed and I thought, wow, this is one of the reasons why people take their lives. I was way more afraid of having to live through the next day than I was of dying. But I'd been through it before. So I had a measure of hope because I had successfully been treated before. But without that hope, I don't know what would have happened. So that was 2008. In 2009, by coincidence, a hockey player, Stéphane Richer, former Montreal Canadian, was a guest on Off the Record. And as I was researching him, I read that he battled depression throughout his hockey career. So I thought, oh, that'll make an interesting question. So I went and greeted him and said, can you just come outside for a second, away from the other guests? I said, would it be okay if I asked you how you're doing with depression? Because I think your fans would like to hear. And he said, it's very painful. I don't like to talk about it. So I said, would it help if I talked about it? And he said, what would you talk about? So I told him a bit of my story and he said, let's do it. So we went on the air, and this is the first time I ever shared anything publicly. So I said to him, if you'll talk about it, I'll talk about it. So he talked about it, and he talked about it brilliantly from the standpoint that he shared so much more than I expected, so much more than he had.
Kind of throwing the gauntlet down.
Yeah. So I'm hearing in my ear, like basically 15 seconds. That's all I have left. And I haven't spoken about it because he's so compelling, right? So I realized, oh my God, I made a promise to him. So I say, you know what, Stéphane, I think a lot of people are going to benefit from hearing you talk about your mental illness. And there's one other person on the set who's going to benefit from that, who understands it. And that's me. I understand depression like you. We have to go to commercial. And that was it. And that changed the course of my life. I had never really put the two together, but the perception of weakness is so dominant in us. The fear of being perceived as weak is so huge that if we think that our mental illness is a weakness, we're not going to talk about it. So that was my sort of coming out party. And I would say slowly over the next couple of years, I started to talk about it a little bit more, and people asked me to go give talks. And I think I've talked about it every day since.
Yeah. We're really kind of reflecting on these moments in your life. And I wonder if you can put into words how becoming open about your mental health and then leading this movement, Sick, Not Weak, has changed you as a person, has changed your, change your persona, but also your actual personality.
My persona changed on that day in October of 2009, when I said, yeah, I understand depression because, I battled it too. Because, you can't equate the two, sort of arrogance and open talk about mental health. You can't, it just like, I'm a good person to be this person, to be this advocate, because, you could look at me, and people did, and say, oh, he's super confident or he's overconfident. And I'm proof that people with mental illness, like depression, that can be devastating to them, can take away every bit of joy in their life. We can fool you. So if no one saw it in me for the year before the Stéphane Richer show, if no one ever, not one viewer ever said, wow, you don't seem like yourself, or wow, Landsberg isn't so cocky anymore, that I think in a lot of ways makes me, a good person to be doing this, because I kind of don't equate. it's certainly to answer your question, how it's changed me. I think that it's allowed me to feel more useful. You host a TV show, you're not doing anything for the world. You're kind of, you just, most jobs are neutral, right? Not doing anything good for mankind, not doing anything bad. But then I find out that I have the ability to make a difference in somebody's life. If you give, you get, you know, feeling like we have a purpose and a usefulness. And I think that there's a real bonus, an added bonus to using this really crappy thing like mental illness as something really good. I'm just reflecting back on, you asked how it's changed me, and I think that, I mean, I don't know if I'm a better person now, but I'm certainly not a worse person now.
Well, you're a hell of a
And
lot more vulnerable than you used to be. I mean, I feel like I
yeah,
haven't talked to you for a few years, like at least 10, and I'm feeling a very different person showing up today. Somebody, I mean, I think you've always had a lot of guts and courage, but to be as vulnerable as you have been and are, and also really listening at a different level. I mean, your heart is open. That's what I'm feeling. And I mean, that's a beautiful way to go through life.
vulnerability is, if you're talking about everything to do with mental health, whether it's the stigma, whether it's the perception of mental health, which relates to the stigma, and whether it's convincing people that maybe they should be speaking to someone, because as we've already talked about, you can be sick and not know it. What counteracts all of that is that person that shows vulnerability. It's very useful to say in front of a group of, 500 people in an auditorium in a community center. It's useful to say, hey, I battle depression. It's way more useful to say, I battle depression and here's what it does to me. And here's how it has really crippled me in certain ways, because people relate to that. It's the, yeah,
Yeah,
that's
and
me
it's
syndrome.
your power of when you're a storyteller, you bring people to places in their heart and in their experiences that where they can connect to. And you are, as a journalist, you're a trained storyteller, and now you're bringing the most important story, of your life, into the public sphere. I wondered if you feel like there's still stuff you need to do in this, time. I know you've got a lot going on with Thick Knot Week, and you've got a few other projects on the go. What continues to drive you, and what do you still think that there is to do?
Well, I think it's kind of like, if you're a doctor and you have helped people and maybe you've saved people, I'm not comparing myself to a doctor, but I'm comparing it to the thought process of, okay, well, what else do I want to do? And the truth is, if you're a doctor, there's always more people out there that you are going to need to help. So it's not like your work is done. It's not like you go, okay, I'm done. Everyone is better. And the more I do, the more I see this is needed. I think we kind of bury our heads in the sand when it comes to like the stigma. Oh, we're doing so much better, or it's so much better now than it was. I mean, I don't know. Like people ask me that question all the time. What do you think, Michael? Is it stigma? We're doing a lot better, right? It's like, how do I know, right? Like I'm one person. I can't quantify that. But my instinct tells me that there's still a huge stigma when it comes to mental illness, and the perception of being seen as weak still dominates people and still prevents them from getting the help. I mean, we all know people, right, who tragically have taken their own lives or have tried to take their own life. And we all know people who the reaction was, oh my God, I had no idea. Nobody knew that they were suffering.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the world that we have to aspire to, where no one is going to say, okay, well, I'd rather die than reach out and ask for help. And that's, I guess that's what kind of keeps me going.
It's powerful. And you're right. There's still a lot to be done. And we absolutely know for sure that young people especially struggle with reaching out for help a lot of the time because they don't think it works. They don't think anything is going to help because they don't have that wisdom and the perspective that maybe somebody a little bit older does. I'm wondering if you can go back in time and imagine 13-year-old Michael Landsberg, not another Michael, you, and whether you can give that person a piece of advice that would help them.
I for sure could. But the question is, would I listen to that advice? Because the things that prevented me from, I mean, my number one advice would be, go and share this, tell people that you have this terrible fear. You won't ride on a bus to go to camp because you're afraid the kid beside you is going to throw up. All of the things that I wouldn't do because of it. I would tell the 13-year-old Michael, you have these amazing parents, go and, tell them. But I'm not sure that I would have listened because my mindset back then was very different than it is now. But that would be the advice to my 13-year-old self, like talk about it, find out if anyone else, you think you're the only one, but maybe you're not.
Yeah. The last question is one I'm actually asking all the guests that come on the show. And it's about reading, something that was hard for me to do. I didn't learn till later. I had dyslexia. I struggled with it. But it opened up a whole new world to me. And it was like the world expanded tenfold. I wonder if there's a book that you can think of that maybe change your perspective, change your life in some way.
You mentioned dyslexia. I literally can't write for more than 20 seconds. I can't do cursive, but many people can't do cursive anymore because we don't need to. But when I go to a bank and have to fill out a form, I'll say to, and I hate going to banks, right? Is there air that moves in banks? It's just like, oh my God, how can you work in this environment? But I'll say, I need 3 forms. And they'll say, well, no, you only have to fill out 1. I go, I'm going to screw up the first 2. And of the only thing, Silken, that embarrasses me in life that I know of is people seeing me try to write. So dyslexia was a mystery to me, and I was never diagnosed with dyslexia or ADHD until my son Corey showed exactly the same signs. And the only person that's got handwriting as bad as me is Corey. And ironically, dyslexia was always thought of as being, if you're reading 2 grades behind your level, that's an indication that you have this learning disability. I never had a problem reading. So reading was never it, but tying my shoes, was fine. Motor skills aren't that fine. So I've always read, and I guess I can put my hands down now. It's kind of like serving no purpose like this. Oh, Michael, you should put them down. What I got into, I find I'm at my best and my happiest when I'm engaged. My hobby would be World War II. And I read tons of fiction with World War II. Some of the, I mean, besides the horror of it, mm-hmm. It's the most compelling thing that's probably ever happened on the planet Earth, like all the dimensions to it. So I would recommend a book by a woman named Jenna Bloom called Those Who Save Us. I remember, I mean, I read it probably, I don't know, 8 years ago. And I thought, wow, this like every word is crafted. And there's a famous author, well, if you read these kinds of books, named Nelson DeMille. Nelson DeMille was a guest on Off the Record. And when he walked in, it was like, okay, dude, I'm sorry. This is not professional, but I got to do it. Oh my God, you're Nelson DeMille. And it was cool. It was like, there's only a couple of people that I was ever like,
who are you, gobsmacked?
Yeah. He wrote a book called Word of Honor. That was one of my favorite books. And I followed him out to the car, like he had a car and driver, dropped him off. And it's like, okay, sorry, man, but this may be getting creepy, but this is my Nelson DeMille time.
That's awesome. So I got to wind up now. We could keep talking. It's just been absolutely such a delightful conversation, such an informative conversation. I feel like I just am so grateful that you came on today and that you opened up and you shared so much of yourself today. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And whatever benefit you gain from hearing me, I gained the same benefit from hearing you. So thank you for that.
Thanks for tuning into Inflection Time. I hope our conversation inspired you to think about inflection points in your own life. If you enjoyed our chat, be sure to subscribe, rate, and leave a review. It really helps. Remember, every challenge is an opportunity to grow, so keep embracing those turning points. Until next time, I'm Silken Laumann, and this is Inflection Time. I'd like to thank my sponsor, Good Life Fitness, and Tall Boy Water. A big thank you to our incredible guests for sharing their stories with us. I'd also like to thank our fabulous production team, our executive producer, Michelle Archer, our producer, Phil Kluba, and our communications director, Christine Bays. Inflection Time was created by Archer Co., Acronym, and me. As an Olympic athlete, it's not surprising I love working out and I love going to the gym. Strength training is so important for bone health, for metabolism. And our partner is Good Life Fitness. They are offering a 7-day pass to all of our listeners. Visit our description to access your 7-day pass.